Okay, now we're going to move on to the zero product property so we can find the zeros or the x-intercepts. So we've already learned how to do some factoring methods. We've learned how to factor by GCF, by difference of two squareds, and doing our diamond problems. So the zero product property is in this first box here. It says, if the product of two quantities equals 0, at least one of them equals 0. So we're going to go ahead and find the zeros of the function. So in our prior examples, we just had this piece and we factored it. Now we're adding it in as an equation. So we're going to factor it first. So we're going to identify the A, B, and C. Now this is a trinomial where the A equals 1. So we do the diamond method. So we set up the top of the diamond, our AC, that adds to the bottom number of B. So A times C is negative 12, and then our B is negative 4. So we say, what are the factors of negative 12 that add to negative 4? And if you want to create a chart, you can to list them out, or you can do them in your head. So we're looking for what are the multipliers of negative 12 that add to negative 4. So I'm just going to do a couple here. So I'm going to say negative 3 times positive 4. When I add them together, I get positive 1. So I continue on. I would do maybe something like positive 6 and negative 2. When I add them together, I get positive 4. So I'm getting closer. And I'm going to say negative 6 and positive 2. When I add them together, I get negative 4. So that's what we want to work with. So these are the numbers that go on the sides of the diamond. Negative 6, positive 2. So now I'm going to write the factored form. We have our binomial and binomial, and then the sides of the diamond make up the other two numbers. So that's what we've done in our previous lesson. What we're going to do now is we're going to change it to an equation. So we're going to say equals 0. Now we're going to go ahead and use the zero product property. Here's what happens. We set each parentheses equal to 0. So we have x minus 6 equals 0. And then we have x plus 2 equals 0. So we set the factors equal to 0, and then we just solve them like we would do a linear equation. We would add 6 to both sides, and we get x equals 6. We would subtract 2 from both sides, and we get x equals negative 2. These are what we call the zeros of the function. So our answers are negative 2 and positive 6. They are the zeros of the equation. They will then become our x-intercepts when we graph the parabolas. Let's do another one. So we have our quadratic equation. We identify the A, B, and C. The top of the diamond is our AC. The bottom of our diamond is our B. So A times C is 25. B is 10. So we create our chart. If you can do this in your head, that's fine. So we're looking for factors of 25 that add to 10. So we could do 5 times 5. When I add those numbers together, 5 plus 5, I get 10. So that's working out. So these will be the sides of the diamond. Positive 5, positive 5. So now we write our equation in factored form, binomial and a binomial. X, X. x. Sides of the diamond will be your numbers. Now we have it in factored form. Now we set the factors, and this time the factors are the same. So when I set this, using our zero product property, equaling 0, and I set this factor equal to 0, and I solve for x. So I subtract 5, so x equals -5. I subtract 5, I get -5. Notice that the numbers are the same. This is what we call a repeated 0. You're going to find out as we progress through our unit the importance of a repeated 0 when we graph our parabola. So we say x equals -5, and it's a repeated 0. One example left here. We're going to now use the difference of two squareds and the zero product property. So the difference of two squareds and the zero product property. So remember the rule for the difference of two squareds. If you have two perfect squareds with a subtraction sign in between, in factored form, it would be a plus b quantity, a minus b. So if we go back over to our equation, x times x is x squared. 5 times 5 is 25. So we have two perfect squareds. So this is our a term and our b term, and now we're going to go ahead and use our rule. So in factored form, it's going to be x plus 5, x minus 5. Now it's factored. We're going to go ahead and use our zero product property. We set the factor equal to 0, and we solve for x. We set the factor equal to 0, and we solve for x. So we're going to subtract 5 from both sides in that green equation, and we get x to be -5. We add 5 to both sides, and we get x to be 5. So these are what we call the zeros of the function. So we write the two answers together. We have -5 and +5. These will be our x-intercepts when we graph the function.